The original Spider-Man murder. Pretty freaky if you think about it. Makes you want to double check your attic and basement often, just in case. This man snuck into a couple's house and lived in their attic for years in a tiny makeshift room with a false door. He would come out at night to eat. One evening the wife woke up to her husband being stabbed to death in the kitchen. Police were perplexed because there was no sign of breaking and entering or any other evidence at that. She lived in the home alone with this guy secretly living in the attic for about a year but left the house abandoned after much heartbreak. A couple of the original detectives on the case just couldn't get the case off their minds, so they would drive by the abandoned house every so often just to see if they could come up with some new ideas on solving the case. One night on a random drive-by, they see a shadow of a man in the upstairs attic window and quickly bust in to see what was going on. By a mere seconds one of the cops catches a glimpse of his foot going up into this tiny trapdoor. When they push it open, they find this man living in a tiny makeshift room with newspaper clippings of the murder. He would eventually come clean and confess to the murder. The thought of someone living in your attic or basement secretly without you knowing gives me the heebie-jeebies. Posted this elsewhere, but the weepy-voiced killer was a serial killer who would murder women and then call the police weeping, stating his regret and saying he needed to be caught and couldn't help himself. Some of his calls are readily available on the internet and are pretty chilling. Anyway, he bit off more than he could chew one night with a prostitute named Denise Williams who sensed danger, hit him with a glass bottle, and with the help of another dude managed to escape. Paul Michael Stephanie was caught when he sought medical assistance and was identified by the dude who had clashed with him. He was convicted of a murder and attempted murder but later confessed to 3 murders and 2 attempted murders when he realized he would die of cancer. The McStay family disappearance and murder. I'm going to fuck it up if I fully explain, but the short version is a family of 4 is found missing, nothing disturbed in their home, it looked like they just up and left. A search is performed and their car is found near the Mexico border. Border surveillance is checked and a family of 4 who resembles them, on grainy video, is found, so everyone thinks they were running away from something/one. A few years later, someone off-roading in the California desert stumbles upon their remains. After digging deeper into the family's relationships, they arrest the business partner of the slain father of the family. The murder of Mary Fagan. Mary was murdered in 1913 in Atlanta, found in the basement of the pencil factory where she worked. Raped and strangled, she was oddly found with 2 notes she'd ostensibly written which implicated a janitor named Jim Conley. When questioned, Conley told several different stories, but was eventually so convincing that the cops decided that not only did he not do it, he was being framed. Conley eventually implicated a manager named Leo Frank. There wasn't much evidence that he did it, but Frank was a northerner in a southern town and a Jew, so it wasn't hard to convince the locals he probably did it. He was found guilty and appealed, but before that got decided, the judge organized a lynch mob and hanged Frank. In 1982, a now elderly man named Alonzo Mann, who had testified at the trial, confessed that he saw a murderer with Mary Fagan's body. It was Jim Conley, who threatened to kill the then 14-year-old if he ever told anyone. Jesus fuck. I assume the judge didn't make it to 1982 to learn he was wrong? Doubtful. There are other terrible details too. If you look at the Wikipedia page, they have pictures of Frank's hanging body. They were apparently sold as souvenirs. That was a thing once. Worse, if you look, the mob put the hangman's knot in the front. I've read elsewhere that this is what you do when you want the person to really suffer, slowly strangling. Real bastards, these guys. A school bus driver kidnaps 3 girls on August 23, 2002, April 21, 2003, April 2, 2004. He holds them captive in his house in a Cleveland City neighborhood for rape and torture. One of the girls gives birth to a daughter on December 25, 2006. They escape May 6, 2013. Almost 11 years after the first. Ariel Castro, kidnapper of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Georgina De Jesus. Rescued by Charles Ramsey. He has a song about his initial interview, Dead Giveaway. Cleveland is pretty messed up. I remember several years ago hearing about a house in Cleveland where they found bodies stashed in the walls and buried in the backyard. The neighbors called the cops on multiple occasions to complain about the smell coming from the place. After years of ignoring the calls and tips about the obviously creepy place, police finally showed up to question the owner, Anthony Soule, about rape accusations from a woman who got away, and they discovered 2 bodies just laying on the living room floor. Eventually, it was determined he had killed at least 11 women. The cops apparently tried to ignore the calls and complaints about this guy as long as they could because it was a poor black neighborhood and all the missing women were both black and drug addicts. The story didn't help the Cleveland Police Department's reputation. Stephanie Lazarus, the Los Angeles detective who for 20 years thought she got away with murdering her ex-boyfriend's wife. Her interview is the most fascinating thing you will ever watch because she knows all of the tricks of the trade, and yet still cannot get herself out of the trap. Too long didn't watch? It's not easy to summarize. In 2009, Los Angeles detectives had been so successful in solving murders that they went back to cold cases. One case which troubled them had been a young wife shot to death in 1986 attributed to other home invasions in the same neighborhood that night. A bite mark in the victim's leg contained DNA and saliva but never matched up with any criminal in the FBI database. Various family members had suggested ex-girlfriend of the deceased woman's husband, LA detective Stephanie Lazarus, as a person of interest, but evidence had been lacking in 1986 to get a warrant. She had suspiciously reported her service revolver, and a camera, stolen out of her car at a mall shortly after the murder, so ballistics tests were impossible. In 2009, detectives got her DNA from a cup in a mall trash can. The interview in the YouTube video is the morning after the lab told them the Lazarus cup saliva is a perfect match for the saliva DNA on the old bite mark. The moment she knows she is caught is when they politely ask her for a voluntary DNA sample, revealing that they have something from the 1986 crime scene to compare it to. The body in room 348. This is another one I've posted about, but it's such a good mystery. Really, don't read my summary, go for the article. A man is found dead in his hotel room. He enjoys drinking and eating less than healthy and has been a lifelong smoker. It looks like natural causes from a lifestyle that caught up with him. He was found lying on the floor as if staggering for the door. The autopsy says otherwise. He's got a laceration in his scrotum and it's bruised and swollen as if he'd been given a hard kick. There's bruising in his groin that rises up through his hips and abdomen. Inside, his organs are bruised and lacerated. It looks like he was brutally beaten. However, his hotel room was normal, except, for his corpse. Nothing out of order, no blood, no signs of anything foul. Case goes cold. A new detective is brought in, one known for solving the unsolvable. He sits down with the medical examiner to go over autopsy photos and such. Then, he figures it out. The man had been shot. Through his scrotum. That was the laceration, and the wrinkled skin folded to obscure the bullet hole. The bullet had traveled up through his body, causing the other injuries. So, who did it? There had been a group of men in the room next door, and one of them pulls out a gun and starts playing with it. It went off, firing through the wall into the victim's room where it hit him. The men used toothpaste to fill the bullet hole, which had been through a part of the wall that wasn't easy to notice. The 30-year cold case murder of Raina Marroquin that was solved when a New York family found a 55-gallon drum in the crawl space of their basement that had been sitting there for years through many previous homeowners. Detectives interviewed Raina's former best friend, who told them that months before her disappearance, Raina admitted she was pregnant by a married man, but never gave her a name. The investigation revealed that a man named Howard Elkins was the father. They located Howard, then 70 years old, and a day after being questioned by police, Howard committed. Fucker took the easy way out, though I still place partial blame on the officer who specifically told Elkins that they were going to come back and arrest him for murder. One of the worst parts of the story is that this asshole didn't just kill himself, he did it in his neighbor's car/garage. Didn't want to get his own home dirty for his family. Probably caused a lot of unnecessary trauma for the neighbors for something that they had nothing to do with. The case of Jacob Wetterling. He was an 11-year-old boy abducted near his home in 1989. Him and his friends had gone to a local video store and were on their way home when a man stopped them and forced Jacob to leave with him at gunpoint. He forced the others to turn and run and threatened them that they would be shot if they didn't. For almost 30 years the case went unsolved. His friends and his brother grew up feeling the guilt of not being able to stop the abductor. His parents and family had no closure as they had no idea where he was taken, or who had taken him. But they held out hope for all those years that maybe he was still alive. A local man had even been falsely accused of abducting him. Sadly, his remains were found in 2016. About 30 miles from where he was abducted. Investigators were able to find the man responsible, and he confessed to the crime. He had assaulted Jacob and killed him on the same night he was abducted. It's a tragic story and there are a lot more details. Thankfully detectives never gave up on this case and they were able to solve it after all those years. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee in the 1970s. Terrible crimes were rare. The disappearance of 9-year-old Marcia Trimble in 1975 gripped the city in fear and sadness for over a month until her body was found. She was delivering Girl Scout cookies a couple of doors down from her home and vanished. The case was strange from the beginning, and went unsolved for 33 years. I called my older sister when I heard the news and we both just cried even though it had been so long ago. We had friends close to the case and my folks were friends with the police chief at the time. The entire city felt the same way, we all felt she was one of us, and that's what made the whole thing so scary and sad. There were several suspects, and many theories of the case, but none ever panned out. It turns out a local man had murdered a Vanderbilt student and raped a Belmont student just days before killing Marcia Trimble. He was arrested in March for those crimes and was imprisoned. He eventually confessed to Marcia's murder to other inmates who turned him in. Her parents both died before her case was solved. It's a shame about her parents dying before finding out what happened. That must have been an awful thing hanging over their heads for so long. The Superbike murders on November 6, 2003. 4 people were shot and killed in Chesney, South Carolina at a motorsports store. It wasn't a robbery, as nothing was taken. The wife of one victim and a friend who discovered the bodies and called 911 were suspected for years. Then one day in 2016, Kala Brown and Charlie Carver went missing. Kala was found chained up on the property of one Todd Colehip. Charlie's body was also found there, along with the bodies of another missing couple. Colehip was arrested, and amazingly, confessed to the 2003 Superbike murders. It wasn't a love triangle or a drug deal gone wrong. Nope, it was a serial killer who was angry that the staff said he was too fat to ride a motorbike. This one hit me hard, this is my hometown. The dude responsible was a real piece of work. He's monstrous. He started off very young too. I definitely think he's committed more murders than just the 7 we know of. How did the town react? The town was a strange mix. Most of us were horrified, a lot of people avoided bars for a short time after the murders. Bikers had this solidarity going on, you didn't see them much for a few weeks. A lot of women stopped going to places solo for a while. There were increased patrols. Then there were people that openly ignored the crimes, it didn't impact them much, and they just sorta carried on. Chesney went back to normal after about a month or so. We're normally a quiet town, peace was reinstalled and for a time it felt like everyone forgot. And then they found Kayla. The place was an uproar again. Rumors about needing a curfew and increased police patrolling. Things are calming now, but it really tore us up again. I can't imagine what she endured as a survivor/captive. I can't imagine the grief her family went through. I hope she's recovering well. I think this case really changed how our police department handles missing persons. No one expected to find her alive. This one stuck with me since I saw one of those identification discovery shows detailing the story. It's not as much of a mystery as some cases, since it didn't make national or international news while being solved. But I'm damn sure it was a clusterfuck of a mystery for people that knew this couple and police investigating it. Police were called to a hotel because a man jumped to his death. He had a long note in his pocket, and it said something to the effect of, "I'm ending my life because I'm so sorry for the one I took." Super paraphrased here, so police went to his address and found crazy ranting spray painted on the wall including, "Look in the oven." Oh, what did they find in the oven, you wonder? It's body parts belonging to his girlfriend. Her head was in a pot on the stove, and some of her was in the fridge. He strangled her, dismembered her, and cooked her. Supposedly, he wasn't planning to eat her, he was trying to get rid of evidence until his conscience caught up with him. The couple was Zach Bowen and Addie Hall, who had met in New Orleans and weathered Hurricane Katrina together and stayed in the area after the storm. If you Google them, you can find a picture that made it into some sort of magazine or newspaper that was a little fluff piece showing young lovebirds dealing with Katrina aftermath. Apparently, Zach Bowen had spent time in the military and had a wife he was separated from. Zach and Addie bartended together and drank a lot. Some people said Addie was a nasty drunk that could be abusive. Also, there were rumors that they were doing a lot of cocaine. The substance abuse issues and the possibility that Zach may have had undiagnosed mental issues after his military experience are the theories for possible motive of the crime. Edit, I just posted this as a reply to a comment, and wanted to add it here because it adds to how interesting and insane this case is. Also, on the show I saw, they had a friend of theirs giving an interview just kind of giving her opinions on their character and how it was super shocking and batshit crazy for this to happen. The friend was Margaret Sanchez, and she herself wound up pleading guilty to manslaughter in an unrelated case. She and her boyfriend apparently stabbed and dismembered an exotic dancer. Margaret's boyfriend, Terry Speaks, was found guilty of second-degree murder, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice. The victim's name in that case was Yaron Lockhart. The story for that one is that the couple was at a gentleman's club and offered Yaron Lockhart money to come back to their place for a private party. They stabbed her, dismembered her, and she washed up on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. In the couple articles I skimmed, I couldn't find a motive for this. The Lindbergh baby kidnapping. For 2.5 months in 1932 the world went crazy trying to find one of the most famous babies. The kidnappers sent ransom notes and tried to get as much money as possible. Turns out the baby was killed and dumped near the house the night of the kidnapping. My great-grandfather was the assistant district attorney on this case. He was never really convinced that they got the right perpetrator and drank away the rest of his life. Family rumors. That's interesting. Sorry to hear about your family outcome. Did he think it was an inside job? He was not fully convinced the accused actually did it. He thought they were railroaded. A new theory suggests that Charles was a prankster and it was a prank gone wrong, but I doubt that. Ben Needham. A poor toddler from Sheffield, UK, my childhood home, vanished when visiting his grandparents' house in Kos, Greece. He was running in and out of the patio doors to the garden, playing with his toys, and then suddenly he just wasn't there anymore. It was all over the news where I lived for many years. I felt so sorry for his poor mother and the rest of the family. There were arguments about Greek police not doing enough, British police not helping enough or doing too much. Awful unfounded rumors about family and people nearby, DNA test on kids suspected of maybe being Ben, discussed that the Madeleine McCann story got all the press and money. Eventually, one of the workers on a nearby construction site dies of cancer and his secret confession is revealed. He accidentally ran the boy over with his digger and covered it up instead of coming clean. I know they found the toys he was playing with at the time buried nearby recently, but not sure if they have found his remains yet. Such a shame and waste of so many years on an international investigation with so much pain. Manson murders. Manson is so famous now that it's hard to imagine not knowing who was behind the murders, but at the time, there was a widespread panic through Hollywood that was largely blamed on African Americans and then later hippies in general. The podcast, You Must Remember This, does an amazing job of painting a detailed picture of what this felt like when it was still a mystery. That's interesting because Manson's stated plan was to get the public to blame black people in order to start a race war. Right, to think that his motives were successful in instilling fear in some people is troubling. Not due to his motives, but for how easily some people were persuaded. A local one comes to mind for me. In 1971, two 17-year-old girls went missing one night when driving to a party. Some of their friends were driving ahead of them and eventually lost sight of their lights after they missed a turn. I guess some people suspected kidnapping or other foul play, others suspected they crashed into a gravel pit, but searches found nothing. There were multiple sightings of them in other cities, but their families refused to believe they ran away. In 2007, a man who was already serving 200+ years for rape was charged with their murders. They even tore up the family farm to look for the girls' bodies. In 2013, someone spotted the underside of a car in Brule Creek. The girls were found inside the car. I guess there's still some questions about what exactly happened, but the bridge they were near was new and the car was in third gear. It's amazing no one saw the car in the initial search of the area. It's believed recent floods uncovered it and shifted it so that it was visible. Here's a link. He lived to 102 but died 5 days before they found his missing daughter? That's heartbreaking. From the article, police had previously torn up the farm of a classmate of the girls who is in prison on unrelated rape charges. They found bones and purses and other items but were not able to connect them to the girls. That's the unsolved mystery. Dude's in prison for rape but they managed to dig up bones and purses, unrelated to the original two missing women, on his property, and he wasn't charged for those possible murders? Lori Erica Ruff. This guy in Texas married a woman he met in Bible study, had a child with her, and then she started showing signs of mental illness. They divorce and she commits. In 2010. She left a note that was incomprehensible and full of random phrases and references. When her ex was going through her stuff, he found a birth certificate with the name Becky Sue Turner on it, who was a 2-year-old girl who died in a house fire in Washington in the 70s. Lori had stolen Becky's identity and used it to get her name changed to Lori Erica Kennedy. There were no clues whatsoever as to who she was before she acquired the false identity, and her backstory remained a mystery for years. A few years later, she was identified by matching her daughter's DNA to a distant relative in Pennsylvania. It turns out Lori's real name was Kimberly McLean, and she'd left her home in Pennsylvania in 1986 as she didn't get along with her mom and stepdad. I was really fascinated with this one when it was still unsolved, and I found the actual answer a bit anticlimactic. It was clear from everything she'd left that something was wrong with her, and it really gave me the creeps. I'm still interested in this one because there's still a mystery. I realize teens do dumb shit and run away a lot, especially when they don't get on with parents and step-parents, but Lori/Kim went to a lot of trouble. If she wanted to run away and start over, it was 1986, she could just go to another state and start a new life. But she went to a great deal of effort to steal a dead girl's identity and then use that identity to change her name. Again, that wasn't easy, and it took some time, effort, and most likely money to accomplish it. What made her leave? Why did no one look for her? This is not a normal runaway story, and something happened to make her think that this was the best course of action. Nobody gets up one morning and goes, "What a lovely day, the sun is shining, the birds are singing, I think I'll leave everything and everyone I know, disappear, and spend several years acquiring a new identity." It could well have been the emergence of the mental illness that would later lead to her taking her own life. Late teens is pretty common for that, but something happened to make her feel like she needed to leave the way she did. Unfortunately, she's the only person who could have answered that question, and she's gone.